Hello, welcome to this special ITN programme. The ground war in the Gulf began at around 1 o'clock this morning, British time. We'll be on the air until 10:40, and between now and then I'll be talking to our correspondents in the war zone and around the world.
Now, more on tonight's programme changes. In a moment, part 3 of Devices and Desires, followed by a statement from the Leader of the Opposition, Neil Kinnock. The ITN main news is at 10:10, and at 11 there's an upfront special on the Gulf War. Hooperman is at 11:35, and at midnight we join ITN for through-the-night coverage of the Gulf situation, updated right now.
Good evening. The main Gulf news tonight. Israel's defense minister says they will retaliate against Iraq's attacks. The United States, Britain and France have urged against it. There was a major missile alert in Israel tonight after reports of another attack, but it appears to have been a false alarm. I'll be back with Trevor MacDonald for news at 10 in just over an hour.
Now on Granada, part 3 of PD James's Devices and Desires.
You're watching Anglia Television. It's 5:30.
Moscow's man discloses the peace plan, but hopes fade. America's man says we've captured 500 Iraqis. The Australian tourist killings, 4 go on trial. And 2 royal princesses say no more children for us. Good evening. Speculation is growing tonight about the start of the land war, as Iraq remains silent on the Moscow peace plan. It had been thought that Iraq's Tariq Aziz would be back in the Soviet capital tonight, but he's not. Instead, the warnings of the decisive ground war moved up a gear.
Surprise, surprise returns after ITN.
From ITN's headquarters, this is the 8 o'clock Gulf News Report with Trevor MacDonald.
Good evening. Iraq's Foreign Minister, Mr. Tariq Aziz, has tonight responded to the latest Allied ultimatum to get out of Kuwait by promising an immediate and unconditional Iraqi withdrawal, but only, he says, if there's a full ceasefire. The announcement was made by a Kremlin spokesman in Moscow, where Mr. Aziz is holding peace talks with President Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev spoke to President Bush for 90 minutes by telephone tonight, and the White House says it will study the new proposal from Moscow. But it does not seem to meet the terms of President Bush's statement today, calling for Iraq to begin pulling out or face an Allied ground offensive. The full details of the President's ultimatum were revealed tonight. Iraq must begin pulling out by 5 o'clock British time tomorrow afternoon. All Iraqi troops must be out of Kuwait in a week, and troops must leave Kuwait City in 48 hours to allow the legitimate government to return.
The prospect of liberating a homeland left in ruins.
That's it, the full roundup of all today's developments in the Gulf War in tonight's News at 10. Join us then.
You're watching Anglia Television. It's 10 o'clock.
Bush's ultimatums: start withdrawing tomorrow afternoon or else. Iraq's reply: we're looking for peace, but not because of Bush. Baghdad agrees Moscow's new plan, but the US says it's got conditions. Scorched earth in Kuwait: the Allies say Iraq's fired the oil fields. And the final whistle from Dalglish gives the Reds the blues. Good evening. President Bush today told President Saddam Hussein to start getting his troops out of Kuwait by noon tomorrow, 5 o'clock in the evening, our time, or face a ground war. Saddam also had to say publicly and authoritatively that he accepted the Allies' terms. The White House later published a list of 10 terms, covering things like how quickly the Iraqi withdrawal was to be completed, and said any breach would bring an instant and sharp response. The ruling Revolutionary Command Council in Baghdad tonight said it was a shameful ultimatum, called President Bush the devil's friend, but didn't say if it would withdraw by noon.
It's 5:30 and this is Anglia.
American planes kill 9 British soldiers by mistake. Saddam makes more concessions, America turns them down. The scale of the destruction inside Kuwait City. And mortgages are coming down by around 0.75%. Good evening. 9 British soldiers have been killed in an American attack that went wrong in the Gulf War. An American plane mistook their armoured trucks for Iraqis and bombed them. 6 of the dead were under 20, including a 17-year-old. A full investigation is underway. The relatives have all been told.
Before the Anglia News, ITN.
The war ends. The Allies say time to win the peace. Bush says Allied and Iraqi generals will agree the ceasefire. A Kuwaiti nurse says, I killed 22 Iraqis. Special forces retake the British embassy in Kuwait. And the Allies count the thousands of Iraqi dead. Good evening from Kuwait City, the capital of a country officially at peace tonight. A ceasefire has now been in effect for 17 hours and the people are getting used to it. The Allies say they ended the war because there was nothing left to fight. The Iraqi army is defeated. Tens of thousands of their soldiers killed and more than 200,000 taken prisoner. Now the Kuwaitis and their allies say they want to ensure that Iraq can never again wage war against them.
President Bush said tonight Iraq had agreed to a joint meeting of military commanders to discuss important issues like the release of prisoners and what happens next militarily. That was a condition of his ceasefire offer. The Americans will put their ideas to the United Nations tomorrow.
You're watching Anglia Television with the news at 5:30.
Bush and Major say the Soviet peace plan falls well short. But Iran's man says Iraq will withdraw unconditionally. Help for councils that exempt servicemen from poll tax. And the Victoria Blast widow says she forgives the bombers. Good evening. President Bush and Mr. Major have both said no to the Soviet Union's plan for peace in the Gulf. President Bush issued his most emphatic statement. He said the plan falls well short of American requirements for ending the war. There were no negotiations, no concessions. But the Iraqis, Mr. Tariq Aziz, said today that Iraq was serious about withdrawing from Kuwait. And Iran said they believed Iraq was ready to withdraw unconditionally.
Now on Anglia, the news at 5:30 with Carol Barnes.
Saddam says we fight on and we'll win. Major says there's now no glimmer of hope. Washington says it's disappointed, the battle continues. And British artillery's biggest attack yet on Iraqi positions. Good evening. Saddam Hussein told the world tonight, we fight on. The last hope for preventing the land war disappeared when he went on Baghdad radio to throw out the Soviet peace plan.